Today we talk to the French dev himself about his indie game arriving later this year, Aveliana. Now it is a infiltration-action-adventure game, and it covers a whole bunch of different things from 2D to 2.5 with this artistically driven style behind it all. As I said, the conversation covers a whole bunch of different things. I had a blast talking about this game, talking to him, and just seeing the passion and the ambition behind this game. So don't take my word for it. It's time to talk about Aveliana. Why don't you tell me about, so you're a solo dev, you don't have anyone that's on this project with you, correct? It's a solo project of your own? Okay.
I do everything except the music.
Mm-hmm.
Music, I collaborate with people.
And so you've been making the game for how long?
About 1 year and a half. I started in February. Not this year, but last year.
Okay. And then, so one of the questions actually, it wasn't ever specifically written down, but it's something that I did really notice about your project is it focuses on a lot of hand-drawn artwork, and then you translate that into the game itself. So how long does that take to get from just the drawing board all the way to just say, I guess not the full game itself, but like say a level specifically or a character? How long does that full process take for you?
Well, it takes a few months, I would say, because it's hand-drawn, but I draw everything on a tablet, so I draw directly on the computer, still with the hand-drawn style. And the very beginning, what I do is just I do a draft with just the path player, so I can just take this map and try it on with the character and a few enemies, just to check if the size is correct and all this stuff. And then I start really to draw the levels, to draw the objects and all these things. So it takes quite a long time.
What?
You have to implement all the collision boxes, the specific gameplay for some levels.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What drew you to that specifically? Like, what drew you to the concept of just hand-drawn artwork transitioned into a game specifically?
It came quite naturally, I started to draw the levels, to draw the characters, and that's how it was looking like. So I was like, oh, I like it, so I will keep this style. And it's true, what I like also is that it's a bit different from pixel art, and we see a lot of pixel art in indie games. So it's good to try to have a different identity for people to recognize the game, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Pixel art's been surging lately, so it makes sense to try to kind of separate yourself from it. That makes a lot of sense. So
it's still pretty basic. What I do is it's quite minimalistic. I draw with a few colors. Then I try to use different lighting, different, and put the objects in different places to make the map really to make it.
Yeah.
Different.
Well, when I played the demo, it was almost like there was layers to each level, So like when you go under a tree, it changes the whole aspect of the level itself, and that was really something that jumped out to me, and that completely set it apart from a lot of other indie games out there. So that was really cool to see. One of the main questions was, it's an infiltration action game, which I've never actually heard that genre specifically. So kind of walk me through what that is exactly, and then we'll kind of phase into the next part of the question.
Yeah, well, I think it's quite new, but that's also the idea of being an indie dev, is trying to make new things.
Yeah.
Or mix things together and make something new, a recipe. So it's infiltration action. That's the core of the gameplay. And adventure, because it's an adventure. And what I really try to do is try to have the same level of gameplay for action and for infiltration.
What about like the whole 2D to 2.5D? Is that part of that as well, or is that just something you wanted to put in there?
So the transition from 2.5D to 2D is mostly to find also areas in the game where you can take paths where you are not visible, you can skip portions of the game, of the level, if you find this path, and that makes your situation easier. You don't have to fight so many enemies, but of course you have to find them, and sometimes you will have to open one door to go somewhere else and find this path. It's not always straightforward.
That kind of adds a lot to the replayability of it as well, I would assume,
Yeah.
just because a lot of times people will miss those altogether.
It's like a sneaky path.
Yeah,
You have to find it.
exactly. Yeah. And then, so we already covered the art style, and then we didn't really touch on the story itself, but how does the art style impact the story, if at all? And then, can you kind of talk about the game's story without kind of, obviously, we're not released yet, but kind of touching on it without releasing any spoilers, I guess?
I'd say the art is kind of poetic in a sense, like it's an artsy game. And also in the story, it's the same kind of idea. I try to have a story which is like moving in a sense, like something a bit poetic, a bit dramatic, and that's how I think the art is going with the story. Also, the music goes really well with it. Music composer is really good for catching the atmosphere of the game. And yeah, without revealing too much about the story, the initial situation is that Aveliana has lost her child, and well, she wants to go find the child, but her family is against that idea because for some reasons all the humans are in the same city, the same spot on Earth, and so they don't have the right to leave the city, otherwise they cannot come back in it. They are banished forever. So she still wants to go, and she will go. So, but why she wants to leave is because she wants to find her child, and she wants to find artifacts that will help her to come back in time to change what happened in the past.
Okay. Do you have an estimate of how long the story as a whole would be from beginning to end?
Well, I'm trying to make the game last from 6 to 7 hours, something like that. In the normal gameplay. Yeah, it's ambitious. For normal gameplay, I would say if you play without rushing, if you rush for the first time, maybe it will be like 4 hours or something, and if you speedrun the game, it can be much shorter, I guess.
I would assume, though, speed running, you'd miss out on a lot of different things, though, so you would want to take the time to actually go through it.
I mean, speedrunning is also a different way of playing. So it's a lot of replayability because you try many times to optimize your route. So it can be interesting also.
Okay. And then you mentioned the soundtrack to the game is really impactful. One of the things I noticed, a lot of indie developers will sometimes separate the soundtrack and sell it as a separate entity with their game when they launch. Is that something you might be doing, or you're thinking about doing at this point?
I'm not really sure for now. I don't plan it for the release, but maybe that's something we can do later with the music composer.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Be nice.
So talk to me about the game's mechanics. So as a generalization, just like from the combat mechanics and the stealth mechanics, and then there's also these different abilities within the game that players can use. So as a whole within the game, how much does that evolve?
In the tutorial, you just have the dash ability, which is the basic one. Then you can attack. So the idea is that you have a stealth gameplay and you have the action gameplay, or more fighting gameplay. And so to try to equilibrate, to balance both of them, what you can do is you can choose different set of abilities. So you have you will unlock during the games a few slots, 6 slots total. And for each slot you can choose either one or the other. Like if you have the dash and you don't take something else, that will be a kind of shield you can use to recover HP. Instead of losing HP, you will get HP when you are hit. So this way you can choose if you prefer a stealth and a very fast approach, or if you prefer to fight the different kind of enemies you encounter. I think some people will choose all the stealth and the speed, and others will prefer just to crush all the enemies with a lot of HPs and stuff like that.
So the weapons in the game, you just have the one, or is it something that evolves through the story?
You will just have a sword, but it will have different options, like have the normal range, but you can have a long range. Oh, there is actually a ranged attack also.
Okay. And
there will be a ranged attack.
Can you, like, say, rank that up as you go through, as the game goes on?
Yeah. What you can rank up is you can increase your maximum HP.
Okay.
And for the sword, yeah, you can increase the range of the sword, the melee attack, and you can also have different ways of attacking. You can have a short attack, which is just dealing damage. You have a strong attack, which is pushing enemies around instead of damaging them. So you can pull or push them in another direction and avoid getting hit.
And in this game, obviously the demo, you only briefly see a couple different kinds. Well, I believe it was 2 kinds of enemies, really. How many more as the game goes on do you get to see, and how do they kind of just change and evolve? And is there like a hardcore boss fight at any point, or is it just kind of like as you're progressing through the levels, you're facing off against these smaller minion bosses?
So for now, I've made about 20 foes in total.
Oh wow!
And basically, you have the 3 basic ones, which is the one you see in the demo, the yellow one, which is a melee attack. You have the same, but it's a ranged attack. You have the one which is more like a zone area attack. They all have the same detection pattern. Then you have more specific detection patterns and attack patterns that are a bit more original. So I try to combine all of them together. You know, when one of the enemy has a triangle for the detection pattern, and I can use a square for the other and make some kind of fun shapes where this is where you can go without being visible.
Okay.
This is where you cannot go. And with this, I see the level like a little puzzle. You know, like you can go here during 3 seconds, but then you have to move away. Otherwise, you'll be by the enemies. So
yeah,
that's how I see it. And then I will try to make I've made 3 different bosses, real bosses, and I have also what I call mini bosses that are see them 2 or 3 times in the game in total.
What kind of inspired the art style for the enemies? Because I noticed with each one of them, even the towers themselves that you come across, there's like a really, really specific art style they all kind of adhere to. What kind of drew you to that specifically?
Well, for the basic enemies, I wanted them to be basic, so they are just squares or rounds.
Yeah.
Spheres. And then the towers, like, I wanted the player to have the idea that the race is rotating around the tower, so you have a kind of a small line where you can see the light is going through this shape. And that's what I try to do is I try to get the visual that looks like how the enemy will behave. It's not always easy, but yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so it's like abstract with kind of the motion integrated into it. That's
kind of.
Okay. So the game is supposed to release late this year, right? Is there?
That's what I'm aiming for.
Yeah.
Not sure.
Okay. So obviously it could get pushed back at some point, but do you at this point see any specific month, or is it just kind of like when it's there, and that's all you're at this point?
Yeah, I'm more on the when it's ready, it's ready.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer to polish everything, even if I have to take like 5 or 6 more months to finish everything. Because, I think it would be a bit sad to have worked during 2 years on something and then releasing it unfinished or slightly unfinished.
Yeah, and I think lately, especially since I wouldn't specifically call them out, but since Cyberpunk's release, I think a lot more emphasis has been put on when it's ready, release it, other than, patching as you go. So I think there's a lot more acceptance in indie games specifically, and just all games, for that kind of recognition. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, especially for the work you guys put into your games. Obviously,
it's also the closer you are to the end, the longer it looks. It's like, okay, maybe I can finish in 5 months, then 1 month after you're like, maybe I need 6 months to finish now.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you want everything to be perfect or as best as possible.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting actually. I talked to a developer who told me that once you start the game and then you get to the end finally, the end is perfect, it's exactly what you wanted it, and then you go back to the beginning and you polish that, and that's perfect. And then a lot of times there's that middle ground where the middle of the game is kind of left wanting at points, and he said you always got to go back and get that too, and that always kind of extends your window. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah. So obviously you're not quite to launch at this point, but do you have a vision for, say, DLCs, different additions to the game that's maybe a smaller addition, whether it's a character or something along that line, or skins, or even some developers, I know they have like multiple sequels planned already, but they're not even doing the first one. So where are you at in that category?
In that category, I'm at 0.
Yeah.
I never thought about it at all. But I'd say it all depends on how the game is received. Because if people ask me to do a sequel or do a DLC or add a few levels, I will probably do it. I think anyways I could always add a few levels, after the release. If I have some clever ideas or some things I want to add, just people enjoy the game just to plan to play a bit more. But it's not anything planned. I don't know yet what I will do.
Yeah.
For sure, I would love to have more projects on this thing. Like I would love to continue working on it, I think.
Circling all the way back to the beginning then, actually, that ties in the question, what really drove you to start developing this game as a whole, or even just to get into game development as a medium? I mean, what kind of drove you to that specifically?
I always try to find the moment where I decided to start the game dev. I think it's, basically I was coming back from work. It was like, situation was I had to move to another job. And I already had that job, but I was like, okay, so now what happens if I have to find a new job in a different domain? And maybe I could be a programmer for a company or something like that. But the thing is, my CV doesn't show it, so I thought, okay, maybe that's a good idea to make a game.
Yeah.
That's what triggered the idea of making a game, to show some skills, other skills that I can usually show with my CV. And then, I'm a big player, so I used to play a lot of games. So I'm inspired by many different games. That really motivated me.
So you're an indie developer now, and this is your first game. Would you, I guess this is a tough question, you don't have to answer this one, but is this something you would want to keep going with as your studio and just grow it? Or is it something you see as like a jump off point to a larger studio?
I would love to have my own little studio. Honestly, if the game sells enough, that's really something I would like to build, like 3 or 4 people max. Like one guy for the coding, and then one art guy, and then a few other things.
Yeah.
The people working around the project. But I think that's definitely something I would love to do. Because if I have to do a second project just by myself, I think it's really a lot of work. It's completely crazy. Sometimes, when I was starting, I was doing my daily job, and then I was working on the game for a total of maybe 14 hours per day of work.
That is crazy.
In front of a computer, so it was too much.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Was there a point when you had to dial the game back at all from development just because there was so much going on? Or did you just keep going with what you had in mind and just wanted to reach that vision?
I tried at the beginning having a scope which is not too big, and I think I never really removed anything from the game. And also, I try to work on the game on a daily basis, so I do things when I want to do them. Maybe I've forgotten some things that I had to do, but the idea is I try to see, to have the vision of the game in my mind, and then try to make what's important for it, what I have to do every day. But I don't plan anything in advance. So that way I don't have to remake things or to remove things, because if I feel it's not necessary anymore, I just don't make them.
So when the game does release, it's going to Steam directly, so obviously PC. Is there any plans for, excuse me, for say like a Switch release? I know they're they pay a lot of attention to indie devs, especially trying to port them into their system, or even Xbox has been paying much more attention to that as well. Is there any kind of plan to expand outside of PC at this point, or are you focused on that?
For now, I'm focused on the PC, but I think for Switch would be really cool. Mm-hmm. And I actually asked for the authorization from Nintendo to have the rights to make the ports.
Yeah,
that's something I could do in a later stage. And I also thought the game, so you can use it with keyboard and mouse or with a controller. I think it's easier this way to port the game later. The games I took inspiration from, some of them you cannot really play them with a controller, like Commandos, for instance. So I think it's good nowadays to have fully playable with gamepad, not with the keyboard and mouse.
So before we kind of wrap it up, is there any, obviously specifically, let's talk about your different social media channels, from the Twitter and the Steam page and everything else. We'll have that below. And then was there anything else specifically that you wanted to touch on before we kind of wrapped everything up?
Well, I think the most important for me is that people go to wishlist the game on Steam. That really helps a lot for the release and for the motivation also. So it would be awesome if all of you guys go and check the game on Steam.
Perfect.
It's pretty easy to find.
And as I said, we'll have all kinds of cues for the link, so they won't have any problem finding that. Actually, the one question that I forgot to ask you, your favorite part of the game itself, and whether it's a character or a level, whatever it may be, is there something you can narrow down that really pops out for you?
In terms of what I like to do, or in the game?
Either or. I mean, either or. Whether it's something you enjoy developing within the game, when you're test running it, I mean, anything. It's an open-ended question.
Okay, so about the game, the thing I love the most is something secret. So I cannot say what it is.
Okay.
But there is something specific about the story, which is, I think, really cool. And for the game development, what I enjoy the most is really the developing new ideas, like enemies, new kind of gameplays, this kind of transition from 2D to 2.5D, for instance. This stuff is really what I find very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. That is all the questions I had. It's a really intriguing game. There's a lot of really cool stuff going on with it. As I said, from the 2.5 to 2D, just like the attention to detail when you're going into the stealth mode and you pull the hood up. Like, there's a lot of really cool small details that are really intriguing and fun to see in it. I am very excited for it when it launches, so I can't wait.
This hood costs me 400 drawings just to put it, to add the hood.
You know,
I wanted to put it.
Yeah. And you know what? As soon as the animation happened in the game, I instantly saw it, and I was like, that is really cool. So I mean, it definitely pays off. I'm sure that took a long time to actually like integrate, but it's a really cool feature to see.
It's this kind of thing which are important for me also, because it's long to make. It's true, you have to make the drawings and stuff, but also it breaks from other stuff. I mean, you don't have to code all the time. It's good to do drawings also, even if it takes time.
Yeah.
And have the feeling that you are doing something, so it's okay. And not like lost time.
Yeah. It's all about the passion. If you have the passion for the project, then it's not a concern at all, and you can go all day on it. So I definitely see that come through with the game. Aveliana is going to be arriving on Steam later this year. I have the links to the Kickstarter, the website, his Twitter page, and a whole bunch more. The Steam page, obviously. I have links to the demo down there. I had a blast playing this game. I had a blast talking about this game. There's a whole bunch of ambition behind this project. There's a whole bunch of love behind this project. And I cannot wait for it to arrive later this year. But like I said, if you don't want to wait, the demo is down there. Give it a try, see what you think. Like, comment, and subscribe. Show the French dev some love because he deserves it. He is an extremely ambitious and extremely talented developer that needs your support day in and day out. So without further ado, I will see you all next time, and I'm excited for that time to come. Take it easy, y'all.